YouTube at the end. So if you don't want your, name or anything, just be aware of that will be posted to YouTube at the end of this. So I've got a couple topics, and then I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Looks like John's joining us. And so it's been a while, John, but welcome. And I'm not going to go through my whole spiel again, but in the chat is a link to the Google form. John, if you have just to get contact information, and if there's any like one-on-one questions or comments you'd like me to follow up on, I will check that at the end and get back to you.
Alrighty.
So I did want to talk. I've got a couple topics, and then, like I said, open to anything you guys would like to talk about. But we're in this, I think, very exciting time of the year where we're at the midpoint, and we have one foot in this year, and we're starting to put one toe into next year. We have coming up our final opportunity week in a week's time. So next week is finals prep week, where we try to limit or eliminate any new projects, new assignments. Students should be culminating their kind of units this next week. That's not to say they won't have work next week, but we're asking teachers not to give new work. It's more culminating work, finishing up a project, finishing up a presentation, and then review for the following week, which will be final opportunity week, where we have half days. Monday's a full day, and then we go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as half days for students to take their 90-minute final opportunities. Finals can look a variety of ways. It could be a traditional test, although we've tried to move away from that. There should be authentic assessments, and again, whether that's writing, whether that's presentations or projects, but a culminating assessment that will hopefully help students' grades is what we're hoping for. But in some cases, if students don't prepare and don't do well, could negatively potentially affect their grades. And we are moving out of last year's model, which was, because we're coming back from COVID, it was much more of a do no harm. And not that we ever want to do harm for students and their grades, but the idea that there is accountability for students and their assessments. So we hope kids, get lots of rest and are prepared, and that they do well. And then the afternoons are there for students to work with teachers if need be around making sure they get caught up, so that when final grades post that next week, they're in good shape. And we're really trying to work with our teachers and students on eliminating I's, the incompletes, as much as possible. The district last year implemented no F's. So instead of an F, there's an N for no grade or no evidence. That still is in effect. But that's really for students who literally either aren't attending or didn't show up or did nothing during the course of the semester. The incomplete, we're trying to phase out as more of a temporary assigned grade for students who, for whatever reason, at the last part of the semester, just had a sickness or they had a family emergency that didn't allow them to complete the last part of the semester. And this allows teachers to work with those kids to make sure they're caught up. So that's all coming in the next week. We realize that does increase anxiety and stress for students and for teachers. Grades always do. And for our ninth graders, this is the first time that they've experienced this. And so our leadership is putting together a mental health week during that week, where they're going to have planned activities and different food breaks and things to provide our students so that they feel supported during that time. So we have that coming up. And then obviously right after that is the start of second semester, which I want to say is February 7th. Is that right? It's Monday. Let me double check. February 6th. So that is the midpoint of our school year. And we will have some schedule changes. We always do at the semester. Sometimes we try to balance class sizes. Sometimes we add sections to the schedule, which then has a domino effect. So it's important that kids check their schedule on that day to make sure that they know who their new teachers are, if they have a new teacher. But it is in the effort to reduce class sizes and or to make sure that they're balanced. And then quickly thereafter, once we start second semester, we head right into course selection, formerly known as forecasting, for next year. And so that starts really with the middle school. It starts with our 8th graders in February, where our counselors go down to the middle school and they start talking to our 8th graders about courses to sign up for. And then that moves into our forecasting for our current students at the end of February and early March. And we're going to have a couple things to help parents and students. One will be at the end of February. Be on the lookout in the Express for an IB informational night. That will occur sometime in late February. That will be specific to, it's open to anyone, but really if you're a 9th grader or 10th grader and you're looking to move into IB classes or the IB diploma program, that's information directed to that grade level. We would obviously also take incoming 9th graders if they want information. And then that's going to be followed up on March 2nd for our curriculum night, and that will be in person. We had it in person last year. A lot of schools have moved away from in-person back to school nights or curriculum nights. Our feedback has been that parents really appreciate being in person, seeing the building. In particular, our incoming 9th graders, I think, is an opportunity for them to walk the building. And we try to make that a real community event where we have clubs represented and activities and sports. We'll have breakout sessions related to athletics, advanced programs, and then by grade level. And so that'll be March 2nd. And then I want to say that forecasting materials are due either right before or right after spring break. It's right around that time. And then we start moving into planning the courses for next year and what our class sections will be and that sort of thing. At the same time, we start getting budget information from the district, which I'm probably going to ask Becky to talk a little bit about. But we do have some budget obstacles our way that we know we're going to have to work together to overcome. And then, quickly after spring break and into May, we start with IB testing. And so if you have 11th, 12th graders in particular, we will start IB testing in May. And we are asking for parent volunteers. So just planting that seed now, but really hopeful that we'll have parents help us in facilitating the tests. We always have a staff member who's the main contact, but you typically work with a parent or two to also support some of our larger tests. So that will be information that will be out in the Express. Just be on the lookout for it. So with that, Becky, I mentioned the budget. Do you want to speak at the 40,000 foot level about what you're seeing at the school board? And we had some information yesterday in our leadership meeting that is going to help inform us about what's coming too.
Yeah, this just seems like this is always the battle every 2 years when the legislature starts, that K-12 funding really has to go front and center in front of our legislators. And not to get too much into the weeds, but we have a current service level, just like all of us running our own house budgets, any business that we're a part of. You have this is what it actually costs to run our business, to run our home. And so the district has what we call a current service level. This is what it costs us to provide all of our staff, all of our services, everything in a given year. And we base our budget on that, and we let the legislature know, all the school districts, all 197 of us, let us know what it costs us to just run the district. Well, just like all of our homes and all of our businesses, the school district has had to deal with inflation, the higher cost of everything. So we're going to the legislature to say, we at least need enough money to stay evened, to not have to go backwards. And so right now, the governor first proposes a budget, then the legislature goes at it. And right now it looks like we are millions of dollars difference between what the districts all say we need just to keep the current service level and what we need to actually, go forward. So we're trying to prepare all of our schools and all of our principals that there may have to be some changes made. And the legislature gives us money two years at a time. It's split in half, so we'll know what we're going to get, but we won't know that until April, May, June, and we have to pass a balanced budget in the district by June 30th. So that means, you know, our business office has to work with all the different departments, all the different principals have to work together to say this is how much money we're going to need to run our schools. So we are already preparing. The other thing on top of that is most of you are aware the federal government gave each of the states and gave education what they called ESSER funds. And that was for us to get kids back on track. So we used a lot of those ESSER funds to hire social workers and psychologists and interventionists. But once those ESSER funds come, that means if we want to keep those people, which we think are important, because even though we're hopefully through the pandemic, we're not through with the repercussions of the pandemic, and our kids still need some support. So for us to keep up and sustain all of those positions, we need to have additional funds at the state level for our general funds. So I represent Washington County at the state level, all the school boards in Washington County, and serve on the government relations side. But we reach out to parents. So if you can have you or your student, you know, talk about what cuts would mean, and we won't know what those cuts are until later in the spring. But I just want to warn you. And if you have a chance to talk to any legislator or friend, just say that we really need to at least keep the same service level at our schools and not go backwards at a time when our students need us the most.
Yeah, and I'd add a couple things that we learned yesterday in our leadership meeting, just to add to what Becky said. One is currently, I believe the number that's being floated out from the state legislature is $9.5 billion for education in the state. For us at the Beaverton School District to maintain our current service level, it would need to be, I think, 10.3 billion was the number. It's early, and you know, I've done this long enough to know that those numbers change and they fluctuate, and typically they go up. The governor's budget, it hasn't officially come out yet. I think end of January is when it officially comes out, and then we start as a district plugging in those numbers, even though it's not finalized, to see how it would affect us. Becky mentioned the ESSER funds from the federal government that came from COVID relief. Those end September of 2024. And so we have to spend that money basically next year. And then that money is gone. And to Becky's point, most of that has been directed to, some of it was teachers. A lot of it was social workers, grad mentors, really support for our students who continue to need support coming out of the pandemic. But that money goes away. So if we want to recoup those positions and have that support, that means it then has to move into the general fund, which that pushes something out of the general fund, right? It's all squeezing the balloon, so to speak. The other piece that is even more daunting, that, you know, this is something we don't really have control over in terms of the budget, is our enrollment is decreasing in the district, particularly at the elementary level. Not so much at the high school level right now. We're actually pretty stable. In fact, at Mountainside, we're growing again, which is good to see, all of the development around us. But at the elementary level, the enrollment is dropping. And so, you know, there's going to be some restriction that happens just generally because we're paid by student, by and large. Less students means less money. So how that will affect the system is yet to be seen. One of the things that, you know, we do in this district is we try to make sure everyone has a job. But if you're an elementary teacher and now all of a sudden enrollment's down and we have less positions and you're entitled to a job, well, your certification might bump you into the middle school. Well, middle school people need a job, so certification may bump into the high school. So there's a bumping effect that sometimes happens that causes staff changes, along with just regular attrition. So a lot of things kind of colliding at once: the reduction of enrollment, the elimination of ESSER funds, and then the governor's budget that we're going to be addressing. I'm also the comprehensive high school rep on the committee that's going to help kind of determine the budget. So we start our next meeting. Our first meeting is February 1st, and we are going to make recommendations to the big district budget committee about what that looks like for us, particularly at the high school level. So as I mentioned, it's exciting time, but it's also a little nerve-wracking because we don't have all of the answers as we plan for next year, but we are in the process of planning for next year. Any questions related to anything that either Becky or I just said, whether it's budget related or end of semester, beginning of next semester? And again, you can verbally pop in or put it in the chat, or if it's one-to-one, you can put it on that Google Doc. Looks like Melissa had a question about lunch schedule. That's a great question. So yes, our lunch, we hope to keep the lunch schedule the same from first to second semester. You're saying it may be outdated in general. We'll have to update that if it's not. Or the district went to a different online platform, and so it's some of the pieces we need to update for sure. I'll look at that. There also may be some updated lunches second semester as we try to balance both sides, first and second lunch. And with schedule changes, if students do change schedules, their lunch may potentially change on odd or even days. But I will look into the lunch. You're talking about who has lunch, I would assume. I'll put that on my board. Thank you, Melissa. Any other questions, general questions? I see John has a one-on-one question. I'll direct message you, John, or email you that.
Todd, I'll also mention at our, the school board had a work session this last month, and this was not something that the school board voted on, but it was something that was 2 years in the making that definitely parents have been following. And that is the school board listened to 2 years of looking at how we should move forward with the relationship that we have with our school resource officers, which we're in the process of renaming and looking at. And after doing an outside study and meeting with students and meeting with parents and doing surveys, again, this is an operational decision at our school district, because the city of Beaverton, who provides school resource officers for 3 of our high schools, and then Washington County, and then we also have a relationship with the city of Hillsborough for base out on 185th. So we work with 3 different law enforcement agencies. We get the majority of those services are picked up by the county and by the city. So it's not something that necessarily comes out of our budget. That would be a school board decision if it was funded out of our budget. But instead it's an operational decision. And the Superintendent Balderas has agreed to 1 year going forward that we will be keeping that relationship with the school resource officers. And there will be some changes made in how we are doing interacting and what school resource officers will be used for, and training and different things going forward. But I did just want our parents to know that that was something that was 2 years in the making, and a final decision had been made this last month.
And for us in particular at the high school, I mean, SROs are invaluable. And we're really fortunate. We have a great one, and it's all about keeping kids safe, but also relation building. And he's more of a resource. I mean, school resource officer, kids come to him all the time with things that are happening outside of school or even in school that may have legal repercussions. And so I know for us, we are very fortunate that we're able to keep them. Jill had a question about the weekly portal relay of screen time. I assume that's the email that also says, like, these are the websites your child has visited this week, right? Is that the same email?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that's the same one.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a cost, to be honest with you. I think that's something that, as part of just being in the district like system, so to speak, with the district Chromebooks, that was something they chose to switch on. I know my kids in Sherwood, I get the same emails every week. And I think it was actually at the request of parents. Some parents wanted that information to know, what websites their kids were visiting. I'm not sure about the screen time piece of that. Like, that may just be an added piece.
It got turned on during COVID when everybody was on the screen all the time, and there was like the big outrage around how come our kids suddenly we have, a ton of screen time. And
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of ways to manage our kids' screen time, but hearing from the district, I mean, it just has felt like, oh, super. So anyway, it's at the time when it was introduced, it sounded like it was something that was going to get paid for. If it's a switch on, whatever, it is what it is. But it's kind of a remnant from COVID that maybe could go away.
Yeah, I do wonder if it is connected, because you also then get the email that says my kids visited these websites. Is that the same email? Is that right?
Yeah, that's the same email.
I mean, I could definitely talk to our district IT department and give that feedback to them. I don't, other than it being annoying, I doubt it's a cost that, if it is, it's probably minuscule, but I'll definitely give that feedback to our district IT. Thank you for that. Any other questions?
So we have in schedules, you can have a late start. Do we also have early release?
You're talking about like if there was a snow event or something? Is that what you mean?
No. So my son's a senior. In his schedule, he has no first period.
Oh, yeah.
So 3 days a week, he's got 0 period. And so he shows up at 6:30 and then he comes home and then he goes back.
Yeah, that's
And it just seems
silly.
like it'd be a better schedule if he had early release rather than late start. But I don't know if that's a policy or
Yeah, no, for
it's
sure.
not practical, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound smart at all, to be honest with you. But we have both early release and late arrival. Some of it may be the courses that your son signed up for. Like if he's in a singleton class that's only offered the last period of the day, as seniors, oftentimes they're in classes that are very specific.
Right.
And so it may be that, it's only offered 7th period or 6th period. And therefore, that's why he has to have that
Sure.
schedule. And then just the anomaly of him being in jazz band for 0 period. But
Right.
certainly he can work with his counselor if there's a solution, and I assume he's still doing 0 period 2nd semester. It would not make sense for him to have to leave and come back. It would make more sense for him to have 6th or 7th as a early release.
Yeah, I mean he's got serious senioritis, so I don't know if maybe the every other day where he can get up at 10 is his real plan. I don't know.
Right. Well, he's in jazz band though, right? If he's coming.
Yeah, but that's 3 days a week.
Yeah. I would recommend like it, I don't know who his counselor is, but having him reach out to his counselor. And now is probably a good time as we head into 2nd semester. So any
Right.
schedule changes that happen now, and then make sure it's a set for when it starts up.
Okay.
Yeah. You did, John, do you mind me asking your question that you messaged
Oh, yeah,
me?
sure.
Yeah, just about seniors and athletes. So I want to make sure I understand it. So your question is, how do athletes in spring sports generate interest from universities when applications to college are due before spring sports even start? I assume you're referring to like scholarship
Yeah, sure.
opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Most, in my experience, a lot of colleges and universities that are looking at students for full rides and that sort of thing already have those students on their radar for athletics. That being said, we know that a lot of times they have tremendous breakout senior seasons, and that generates even more interest. Sometimes, I mean, my recommendation would be actually reaching out to specific universities. What does your son participate in?
I assume track and field.
Track, okay. Also reaching out to Coach Gaffney,
Right.
because John would be a tremendous resource to be able to kind of hook him into some of those colleges and universities that would have opportunities for him at the next level and to get some money out of it too. But that is an interesting point, because you're through the application process. You have to, typically you're making a decision in February. And then you haven't even had your spring sports season yet to know. But I think a lot of times that financial aid package after the fact can be changed too.
Right.
And like, we're adding scholarship because this kid, you know, can pole vault really high, and we want to make sure he's participating in our track team. But yeah, it's a little more complex at the end of a student's senior year. Becky, I don't know, you've had some experience with kids going through graduating.
Yeah, you're that spring sport, you're right, when you have to apply before, I think exactly what Todd said. I mean, with my own son, it was, it was a year beforehand, and the opposite can also happen. I mean, sometimes they get injured. I mean, they get something going and then something happens their senior year. So I think we're the best advice that is working through the coaches, and because that's again what my son did, was working, because my son was also in a spring sport, and definitely working through the coaches is what helped.
And I know, just, now thinking about it, was a long time ago, almost 30 years ago, but when I went to Linfield, I was recruited to play football, but I also ran track, and so I signed up to play football, and I received a grant because they don't do scholarships. But then after my track season, they came back to me and said, "Oh, we'd also like you to run track, and we're willing to give you X amount of dollars for that." And that happened, actually, it was in the middle of track season. So I think some of that's fluid, but Gaffney's going to be a really good resource for that.
So when were you at Linfield?
Oh, geez, John, now you're
A
dating me.
long time ago.
Oh, see, I went to Pacific.
My wife went to Pacific, so yeah, it was a big. In fact, I remember sitting in the Pacific gym watching Linfield play Pacific, and some hooligans from Pacific had stolen our football sign from the stadium, and at halftime ran across the floor with the sign in hand. And the head football coach at the time, Ad Rutschman, legend, he turned to me and said, "You going to do anything about that?" I'm like, "No." It's like 10, fraternity guys from Pacific with our sign. When I was there in the early 90s, let's just put it that way.
Okay, I mean, I graduated in '93.
Yeah, we're right.
yeah.
You might have been one of those hooligans.
No, but we were at the Linfield game where we threw the interception. You were running it back for a touchdown, and some dummy jumped off the sideline and clocked them, and then we lost our football program. But we did make the Al Michaels greatest sports event of the year. So that was the end of football for Pacific for like 20 years.
That's so funny. Yeah, good old days. Anyway, any other questions? And then I'll respond, John. I saw you put something in there about college prep activities in the Google form. I'll email you directly with that.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, guys. I appreciate your time this morning. And like I said, our next meeting will be February in person. Hope to see you there.
Todd, do you have a minute, Todd?
Yeah.
What's the actual date of the February one?
February 17th. It'll be in the
17th.
Express that comes out next 2 weeks too. Yeah. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, John. Just want to make sure to end the recording.